In the somber twilight of my grief, the world seemed draped in a perpetual shade of gray. My beloved wife, Eleanor, had perished in a fire that consumed our home, and in many ways, the life we shared within its walls. The cause of the fire remained a mystery, a cruel question mark at the end of our love story. Seeking solace and a fresh start, I moved into a new house, a quaint, if somewhat aged residence nestled on the outskirts of town. Its wooden floors creaked with every step, a constant reminder of the silence now filling my days. The house, with its Victorian charm and ivy-clad facade, seemed a world away from the modern apartment where tragedy had struck. Yet as I unpacked my belongings, a faint smell of smoke clung to my clothes, a relentless ghost of that fateful night. I shrugged it off as a trick of the mind, the psychological remnants of the trauma I was desperately trying to leave behind. Days blended into nights, and I found myself caught in the monotony of solitude. But it wasn't long before peculiar occurrences began to disrupt the quietude. Objects I had placed in one room would inexplicably appear in another. I would wake in the middle of the night to the soft sound of someone whispering my name, only to find the room empty. At first, I attributed these incidents to the forgetfulness bred by my mourning. However, the persistence of these events, particularly the unmistakable scent of smoke that would sometimes fill a room, began to fray the edges of my sanity. One evening, as I sat in the living room trying to lose myself in a book, a cold draft swept through the room. The temperature dropped suddenly, and the faint smell of burning wood infiltrated my senses. I froze, my heart pounding against my rib cage, as a low, mournful sigh echoed through the hallways. I was alone, or so I thought. I began to question everything. Had grief unhinged my grasp on reality, or was there something more, something inexplicable at play? My rational mind fought against the creeping dread that something or someone was with me in that house. Each night, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if urging me to uncover a truth I had buried deep within the recesses of my mind. One particularly chilling night, I awoke to find a photograph of Eleanor and me, one I had kept by my bedside, lying face down on the floor. As I picked it up, a sharp, almost electrical jolt surged through me. The glass covering the photograph was warm, as if it had been held over a flame. I was unraveling, caught in a web of memories, guilt, and fear. The house, with its darkened corners and whispering walls, seemed to mock me, a sinister stage for the unraveling of my sanity. Yet I could not leave. A morbid curiosity, a need to understand, anchored me to this place. As the days wore on, the occurrences grew more bold, more terrifying. The sound of footsteps pacing outside my bedroom door, the sudden flashes of movement in the corner of my eye, and always the smell of smoke, lingering like a specter of my past. I knew then that I was not alone. Something or someone was with me, a silent witness to my torment. Was it guilt, manifesting as a phantom in my grief-stricken mind? Or was Eleanor's spirit truly haunting me, a vengeful specter risen from the ashes of our burnt past? I shivered, not from the cold, but from the realization that the answer might be more horrifying than I could ever imagine. The unsettling occurrences in my new home grew increasingly aggressive, as if feeding off my fear and confusion. Nights became a battlefield, a struggle to maintain my sanity amidst the cacophony of unexplained sounds and the ever-present scent of smoke that seemed to seep from the very walls. My sleep was fractured, haunted by nightmares, where Eleanor's accusing gaze followed me through a labyrinth of flames, her voice a whisper in the heat, blaming me for a sin I couldn't recall. I sought distraction in the daylight, throwing myself into the renovation of the house, hoping physical labor would dull my senses to the supernatural siege. But the house resisted my efforts, tools disappearing only to be found in improbable locations, and freshly painted walls would blister as though scorched by intense heat. Each anomaly served as a chilling reminder that I was not in control, that I was a prisoner in a home that harbored a malevolent presence. In an act of desperation, I invited an old friend, Marcus, over, hoping that another presence would dispel the growing dread. Marcus, a rationalist to his core, listened intently as I recounted the incidents. Initially skeptical, he agreed to stay the night, a silent challenge to the unseen forces that tormented me. The evening passed without incident, a temporary reprieve that bolstered my spirits. However, as we retired to our respective rooms, the house awakened. The familiar smell of smoke filled the air, accompanied by a sudden drop in temperature. Marcus emerged from his room, a look of bewildered fear on his face, his skepticism eroded by the undeniable reality of our situation. We sat in the living room, the tension palpable, as Marcus recounted feeling an unseen hand brush against him in the darkness of his room. As we spoke, a cold gust of wind swept through the house, extinguishing the candles we had lit, plunging us into darkness. The sound of someone sobbing softly echoed through the halls, a sound so filled with sorrow that it chilled me to my core. It was then that I saw her, a fleeting shadow at the edge of my vision, a silhouette that bore a striking resemblance to Eleanor. The following morning, Marcus left, his farewell tinged with unease. He offered no explanations, no theories, only a solemn promise to check in. I was left alone once again, with the oppressive knowledge that the phenomena were not figments of my imagination. I was consumed by the mystery, my research a desperate attempt to find a solution, a way to cleanse the house of its spectral occupant. But deep down, I feared that Eleanor's spirit was not bound to the house but to me, a punishing force driven by a grievance I could not remember. One night, as I pored over ancient records and dusty tomes seeking answers, the house trembled with a sudden ferocity. Books flew from shelves, windows shattered, and the air was thick with the scent of smoke. In the chaos, a single clear voice pierced the din, Eleanor's voice, filled with anger and sorrow.
Why did you do it, John? Why?
The question echoed in my mind, a key to a lock I dared not open. The events of the night of the fire were a blank in my memory, a void I had never dared to explore. But now, as the pieces began to fit together, a horrifying possibility took shape, a truth that threatened the very foundation of my reality. The fabric of my reality continued to unravel, thread by thread, as Eleanor's presence became more tangible, more menacing. Her voice, once sweet and comforting, now carried a sharpness that cut through the night, her words a constant reminder of the question I feared to answer. The house, with its ever-present chill and shadows that seemed to move of their own volition, felt alive, pulsating with a malevolent energy that fed on my growing dread. Driven to the brink, I decided to confront the past head-on, to sift through the ashes of that fateful night in search of answers. I visited the charred remains of our former home, a place I had avoided since the tragedy. The sight of the skeletal structure, blackened and desolate, was a physical blow, a stark monument to the life I had lost. As I stood there, amidst the debris, a wave of unbidden memories crashed over me, fragments of that night beginning to coalesce into a coherent sequence. The argument we had, Eleanor's tears, my rage, emotions that had escalated beyond control, the shattering of glass, the smell of gasoline, and then the fire, a consuming inferno that I had, in a moment of unfathomable madness, ignited. The revelation hit me like a thunderbolt. The knowledge that I was responsible for the tragedy, a truth my mind had refused to accept, burying it deep beneath layers of denial and guilt. I returned to the house, a man haunted not just by the spirit of his deceased wife, but by the weight of his own guilt. The air felt heavier, charged with a palpable sense of anticipation, as if the house itself was awaiting my next move. That night, the disturbances reached a crescendo, the very structure seeming to groan under the strain of the supernatural forces at play. Eleanor's apparition became more frequent, her form more defined, a specter of accusation and sorrow. Her voice, now a constant presence, whispered of betrayal, of pain, and of retribution.
You cannot run from your sins, John.
She intoned, a chilling reminder of the inescapable truth. In a final desperate attempt to find peace, I sought the assistance of a medium, a woman reputed to communicate with the spirits of the deceased. She arrived under the cloak of evening, her demeanor one of solemnity and purpose. As we sat in the dimly lit living room, the medium entered a trance, her voice becoming a conduit for Eleanor's spirit. The air thickened, the temperature dropping as Eleanor spoke through the medium, her voice imbued with a profound sadness.
Why, John? Why did you let your anger consume you?
She asked, the question hanging in the air like a specter. I broke down, confessing my actions, my remorse pouring forth like a torrent. The medium, her eyes now mirroring Eleanor's sorrow, relayed her message.
There is no peace for us, John. Not after what you've done.
As the medium left, the atmosphere in the house shifted, the oppressive weight of Eleanor's presence intensifying. I understood then that there would be no absolution, no forgiveness. I had unleashed a darkness that night, one that had followed me to this new home, a vengeful spirit bound by grief and rage. The nights became a gauntlet of terror, Eleanor's apparitions more frequent, the phenomena more violent. Furniture would move of its own accord, the walls would bleed heat, and the air would periodically fill with the deafening sound of sirens, a hellish reminder of the fire engines that had arrived too late to save her. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making, a prisoner to the guilt that gnawed at my soul, and the wrath of a spirit I had wronged. As the boundary between the living and the dead blurred, I realized that my fate was sealed, that I was doomed to relive the horror of that night until the end of my days. The relentless hauntings stripped away the veneer of normalcy I had tried to maintain, leaving me a shell of the man I once was. Each day bled into the next, a monotonous cycle of fear and remorse. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a tomb, its walls closing in on me with each passing hour. Eleanor's presence, omnipresent and wrathful, was a constant reminder of the irreparable harm I had caused. I realized that my attempts to appease her spirit were futile. Eleanor sought not reconciliation, but retribution for the life I had stolen from her, in a fit of unfounded jealousy and rage. The gravity of my actions, the realization that I had not only ended the life of the woman I loved, but condemned her spirit to a restless existence, was a burden too heavy to bear. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, the house fell into an unnerving silence, a stark contrast to the usual cacophony of supernatural disturbances. This calm before the storm was more terrifying than any manifestation I had encountered. It was in this silence that I felt her anger coalesce into a palpable force, a storm that had been gathering strength, now ready to unleash its fury. The temperature plummeted, breath turning to mist in the frigid air, as I saw her. Eleanor, her apparition clear and undeniable, stood before me. The sorrow in her eyes had been replaced by a fierce determination, a chilling resolve that filled me with dread.
You cannot escape judgment.
She whispered, her voice echoing in the stillness. As she spoke, the house shuddered, a low rumble that grew into a roar as flames erupted around us. The fire spread with unnatural speed, consuming everything in its path. The air filled with smoke, choking me, blinding me, as I stumbled through the inferno, the heat searing my skin. Eleanor's apparition remained before me, a specter in the flames, guiding my frantic escape to nowhere. In a moment of lucidity amidst the chaos, I understood that this was her vengeance, a mirror of the hell I had subjected her to. There was no way out, no salvation from the inferno. The fire was her justice, her final word in the story of our tragic love. I collapsed, the smoke and heat overwhelming my senses as the flames closed in. In those last moments, I saw her face one more time, not as the vengeful spirit that had haunted me, but as the woman I had loved and lost. A mix of sadness and peace settled over me, a silent acknowledgement of the fate I had sealed for myself. As the flames consumed me, the pain was eclipsed by a profound regret, not for my impending death, but for the life I had taken, the love I had destroyed. Eleanor's spirit, once bound by grief and vengeance, was now free, her chains broken with my final breath. In the end, the fire claimed me just as it had claimed Eleanor, a poetic justice for the sins of my past. The house and the tormented souls it harbored were consumed by the blaze, leaving nothing but ashes in the wake of the retribution.